Hi, I'm Jeff Bond, and welcome to the Steward Chair, our show about how great leaders build enduring companies that leave a lasting legacy. We believe that leadership isn't about ownership, it's about stewardship. So whether you started your own company or have been entrusted to lead it, we want to help you be a better steward of the people, the mission, and the future that you create through this show. And so the only favor we'll ever ask of you is that you follow this podcast wherever you listen. Thank you. Today's episode features a great conversation I had with Gabrielle Mills. She's the president and founder of Sourced, a back office support firm based here in Atlanta, Georgia, rooted in faith, family, and purpose. Gabrielle shares how she built her business from the ground up about 8 years ago alongside her business partner, leading with heart and discipline through various seasons of growth, values misalignment and challenge, and defining moments of leadership. If you've ever wrestled with how to scale your business without compromising your soul, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. Gabrielle, welcome to the Steward Chair.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today.
I am so glad to have you. I really am so glad that we are shifting the narrative of Chat with Leaders, where we explored the ideas of servant leadership and what it meant to show up like one, to this concept of leadership as stewardship, that is a temporary responsibility that we hold. We belong to the chair doesn't belong to us. We are just keeping that seat warm for the next person. Whether you started your business or not, and you've founded a wonderful business. I want to kind of get into that first and understand a little bit more about why you started it and what is fueling your mission today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm so glad to be here today with you, Jeff. And really, I hope that we can have a really great conversation. I know we will. The business that I started 9 years ago is called Sourced, and we are a back office services company. So one side of our business is Fractional. So we have a full scale accounting firm. We have a full scale marketing agency. We do fractional admin and fractional HR support. Then along the way, our client said, your fractional offerings are wonderful, but I need a full-time X, Y, and Z. It actually started with a project manager for a construction client that we had. And we developed our fifth department or business unit, which is talent acquisition, and we do full-time direct hire placements there. So clients can come in either of those two ways, in a fractional perspective, or I just need some recruiting support. They flip-flop from one to the other depending on how their businesses grow and change. And we're allowed to, we are afforded the ability to work with lots of different clients and lots of different industries all across the country. So it's really a great job to have.
And you started it with your mom.
I started it with my mama. Her name's Chrissy. I deeply respect her. She deeply respects me. And we started it together. It was me that brought the desire to be an entrepreneur to her, but I was still in college, very young, dropped a business major because I didn't want to take accounting. Hilarious, because now I have a business that does accounting. That's like the great comedy of my life right there. And I told her, I was like, I want to do this. And she said, I would love to. I've always wanted to do that. And I said, well, let's do it together because I don't know anything. And at least you know something. You've been very successful in your career. So that's how it all started.
I love that. I remember being young and having the entrepreneurial spirit, but just had no idea of how that would manifest. And knowing that your mom came alongside you and helped you turn that into a reality and help shape that. And now 9 years later, you've dispelled the myth that you can't mix family and business.
No, I've actually found that it has been the biggest blessing. In addition to working with my mom for since the business began, we pulled my sister into the company about 3 years in. And then along the way, we hired our brother, my brother-in-law, her son-in-law. And then we also, for a period of time, brought in not one, but two of my aunts, her sister-in-laws. So we've had a lot of family up in here. There's two married husband and wife people couples in the company. So like we're big family people. We did have another mother daughter working in the company. So we have found that family in the business is has been a really great thing when you start with a lot of respect and a lot of trust. There's a lot that goes into that, but we've seen all the benefits of it.
Well, I love that. And I'm sure we'll be touching on that throughout this conversation, just weaving that into this idea of exploring your leadership journey and stewardship as a leadership philosophy, which I kind of gave you a flyover of what we believe about stewardship, and really caring for all the people and the resources that have been entrusted to us and thinking of our business as something larger than just profit alone. And profit is incredibly important. But we founded this show on the belief that leadership is stewardship. And I'd really like to understand your definition of stewardship and maybe any views on leadership that are countercultural to the world around us.
Yeah, so when I think of stewardship, the first thing that comes to mind is like giving back, which I think is a very important part of leadership. But when I was kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, I was like, what does stewardship really mean? And the image of a shepherd kept coming up to me of really you're in the position to lead the flock. But it is also your responsibility that if the flock breaks up, if a sheep goes astray, you have to go and not and go and get them and lead them back. And you're guiding everybody to a better place, right? Like you're casting the vision, you're making sure people get there, you're making sure all people get there, you're meeting people where they are and guiding them and developing them into a better place, a better where they're a better working style. And I really think that's what we're called to do as leaders is to guide one another. But I do think that it's also there is a big component of giving back. What are you doing for the community at large? What are you doing for your employees personally, not just professionally, not just in a development standpoint, but um, cultivating a good culture in your organization is really important. But also, what is your organization doing for the greater good? I think is also really important as a leader too. All of that kind of goes into the what is stewardship question.
How has that evolved over the course of your 9 years? Because I know as an entrepreneur, there just isn't much to go around in the early days. It's you're just trying to pay yourself at some point,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with serving others in that way and maybe deprioritizing your own well-being. A lot of entrepreneurs aren't even paying themselves in the first several years of their
Mhm.
business. So how did you manage that in the early days, and how has that evolved over your 9 years?
So we made a commitment right from day one that we say God is our third partner, and we have been very fortunate to see His hand working throughout our organization from the beginning. I was never always brave enough to talk about it or bold enough to talk about it, but I can now because it's just been so obvious of what has happened outside of my effort or Chrissy's effort. Chrissy being my mom, I call her Chrissy for work. Um, the definition of the give back has not evolved, but also evolved at the same time. So from the beginning, we said we're going to use this business to give back in some way. So we said every month that we make profit, 10% of that is going to go back to an organization that we select. We're going to change the charities every year. We actually allow our people to submit charities that are important to them, and we select up to 3 of them each year, and we divvy out the profits that we make in the month. And we actually do it by the quarter, and then we third it or half it depending on how many organizations. So it's all fair. Um, there were a lot of months, there were a lot of years that were not profitable. Therefore, we had that give back strategy, but nothing actually ever gave back. But we attempted, right? If we made money, somebody else was receiving the benefit of that as well.
Mm.
In terms of, so that has not evolved from the beginning, but in terms of how the give back to my employees has evolved, we have always had the desire to like provide educational opportunities, development opportunities, like really digging in. We're a very heart centric organization. So when you come into our doors, you are like family to us and we pour a lot into you. At some point along the way, we learned when people were going to take advantage of us and when people weren't going to take advantage of us. So we had to get kind of strategic of what that give back personally and professionally to an individual looked like because some people got jealous of other people. Some people did not take to our style. They wanted a different style. And sometimes it was just straight up taken advantage of. And that's not good. You have to look at the bottom line in a business as well. And you have to be really careful about protecting and guarding what it is that you've built. So we did have to get smart along the way of what that has looked like. And that's the part that's evolved over time.
What did you have to do to get more smart? Like, what were some of those tensions that you had to work through? And like, all the entrepreneurial leadership challenges typically boil down to people and challenges like that. So, what were
Yeah.
some of the hard truths that you had to face during that time?
The hard truth is that your intention always doesn't land in the way that you intended it to. That
Hmm.
people are always going to have their interpretations of things, um, but you seek to do good anyway. Um, Probably the saddest but most impactful takeaway is that sometimes, often, no good deed goes unpunished. So you have to make sure that you are being fair across the board, and everybody is will look at you what you're doing and say, "Yes, that is fair." Um, it kind of crops up differently for other people. Some people are money motivated. Some people don't care. They want to be personally developed. Some people, they're motivated just by having a simple conversation about what's going on in their personal life. So we try to tailor what we do and how we develop and pour into all of our people differently in a way that speaks to them. But if we're going to do something at a greater whole, we have to be really careful to make sure that no one's going to feel slighted or it's not going to land in a way that isn't our intention.
Yeah. I'm interested because I've been in this situation in my leadership career where no good deed becomes unpunished and fairness becomes the
It's so
issue.
unfortunate.
Yeah, and how do you I guess invite that feedback during that time and create an atmosphere where people are willing to express those emotions, and then how do you respond and apply that listening?
Yeah. So in our company, we have a very strong set of core values. Our values are serve generously, deliver excellence, do the right thing, and team
Mm,
before self. We
mm,
love those values. We teach on those values from day one. It's in the orientation, and how they manifest is also in the organization. That's You don't just hear it one time. We quiz people on them. People who've been here for 6, 7 years. Um, we still call them up and we're like, what are the values? It's important that the leadership live out those values. Otherwise, they're words on a wall. No one cares. Um, to us, we're always talking about what those values mean in a certain circumstance, with a certain client, with how we want to show up to people. And we have always invited feedback. It's not specifically said in our values, but our values, if you look at them like on the whole, as an overall scope, being able to share candidly is a part of that. That's how we deliver excellence to each other. That's how we serve generously to each other. That's how we put team before self. Because without feedback, it's our organization is never going to improve, and it's a bad culture. So it's kind of an undercurrent for everything. And we ask and welcome feedback all the time. And not at every meeting, it's not super formal, but we're like, what do you think? How would you solve this? How did that feel? We do postmortems when something goes wrong, and we're like, how do we go back and look at this and say, what could we have done better? Um, and we also do once a year, we send out a company wide survey on just to make sure that we're
mm.
are still aligned in our culture. And that obviously tells us a lot too.
So
And
really
we just
great
have really good
practical things.
relationships with our people. Our people are not afraid to tell us anything because we are inviting it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite books by Patrick Lencioni is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Have you read that before?
It's so funny you say that. I was having a meeting this morning and I have not read it, but they were talking about that just this very morning. And they were like, you have to read that book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're kind of living it out without, having the codified language, but it starts with a baseline of trust, and mistrust is the first dysfunction of a team. Without absence of trust, breaks down everything else performance wise.
Yeah.
But the second layer of that is the inability to have conflict. And,
Mhm.
so what you're talking about here is inviting in healthy conflict, having candid conversations, applying those conversations and being able to address those things versus letting them fester within your organization. Again, you can have all these fluffy values that are just rhetoric and on the wall, but if you're not constantly evolving and working towards them and you know, and mitigating kind of the conflicts that are happening within your organization, then I could see it going awry. So has there been a time where you felt challenged by that, or has that just been kind of day one, really easy for you and your mom and your team to be able to embrace?
It's been very natural for us to embrace, but there have been some tough seasons in our business. One of which was just last summer. We had not one but two clients that were probably the largest that we've brought on to date, and we brought them on at the same time, and it really strained our resources. It We ended up having not turnover in the business, but turnover on the accounts because people weren't able to do what they said they were going to do, and or they didn't have the right knowledge. So there's just situational things happened, and it put a lot of strain on some of the relationships between leadership and our accountants because they were both accounting clients, and leadership within accounting and the actual staff. And everybody had the same goal. The important thing was is we all had the same goal, and we all knew not to take anything personally. So we had already had that foundation, but I mean, it was a trying time. You can imagine. We were working all hours of the night for weeks, actually for months. It was all summer. And you can imagine things got pretty tense and things got really candid. But at the end of the day, we know we have the same goal. We have the same respect for each other. We need to show up as kindly and compassionately as we can because we know the intentions of the other people. We've all worked together for years. We all love each other. And we try to remind each other of that in the hard times of like, disclaimering things of like, okay, this is not going to come out right, but here's what I'm thinking, even though it's not going to come out right because I'm exhausted. So we try to nurture that along the way. But I mean, any business is going to go through those bunks, and we certainly have, and you just got to manage them with respect.
That's really good perspective, and particularly the explicitly saying when maybe you're falling short of that and you're really challenged in that season. I love the way you communicate with one another, and that kind of boils down to, you talked about the two large accounts in the season, and everybody wants that big hit to their business, to something that just takes them to the next level. But one of the toughest balancing acts leaders face is meeting immediate needs while staying anchored to long term
Hmm.
purpose. So what practices or principles that maybe we haven't talked about have helped you hold that tension well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I first want to say, unlike your question, one of those clients we had to fire,
Mm,
because the juice was not worth the squeeze. It was really sweet juice, but it was putting way too much pressure on our resources and our business, and we didn't want to operate that way. So I think that in and of itself is a good lesson of, even when you bring in the whale, if it's not right for your company and right for your people and it's challenging you, cut it loose. Um, so I do think that that's important to say. Now, the long term vision and the short term priorities, this is really tough to do, but we have, Chrissy and I, from year one, when we had no clients, we always got out of the office for 1 week out of the year. We would go on, it's, I think, the second week of January. We call it Think Week, where we go with a very defined agenda of all the things we want to work on in the business and just step away from the noise, step away from everything and say, this is what I want to work on. Depending on the agenda of that Think Week, we've brought other people to Think Week, and it is just a very intensive, like, it is not for the faint of heart. We're up there for 5 days, sometimes 9 days, working round the clock on the business. I think that's a really important practice, even if it's just a day, for you to step away from the minutia of everything and the situations that you're in and really look at the business from above and say, what are the things that I need to work on? And from a leader's perspective, that's your job, is to keep up with that all year. In every meeting, in every conversation, you are guiding your team to those to that destination, right? You're the shepherd trying to get everyone there. So your team is going to be focused on the circumstances, and your team is going to be focused on, how do I solve this problem right now? And they definitely need your guidance when they pull you in on like situational detail things. But part of your job as a leader is to say, all right, we have this problem, but remember, we're going here. And so are the solutions that we're coming up with for this problem congruent with the vision of where we want to go? And if it's not, how do we change what we're doing so we're at least going toward that direction?
What kind of places do you go to, and what would you say the cost would be if you don't do that at the beginning of the year?
Good question. So we go to the same place every year. We're very lucky that Chrissy has a lake house in South Carolina on Lake
Mm,
Keowee. It is tranquil and beautiful,
love
and
that.
we don't ever leave it. We basically stay in our pajamas or our sweats, and we look at the lake and we wave at it and watch the sun go up and then the sun go down. So we don't enjoy it at all, but it is really nice to have a nice view while we're doing some hard work. In terms of investment, we've always been really cheap with it. We don't like to spend a lot of money. So we're basically got a free place to go. And when we buy food for the week, we're cooking for ourselves. I think financially, you can spend a lot of money on these things and you should. Like, it is so, the returns that you get not in money, like it's astronomical of what you come out with of like remembering where you want to go in your business, coming up with strategies. We've had Think Week sessions where we're doing nothing but documenting SOPs, and we're actually doing the work there that we would never get a chance to do while in the office. So it's not all strategy. Sometimes it's just things that have to get done and you don't ever have a chance to do them. Um, so I highly recommend it for anybody that is trying to look at the business from the outside in.
And how do you stay on task? Because I could see, like, when I'm thinking about things that need to get done and SOPs and all of that, I want to do it, but I also really want to preserve that time to think strategically. So if I'm there to think, but I'm also getting some things done,
Mhm.
how do you make sure that you're staying on task and that you're not just using it as time for like busy work, for
Yeah.
instance?
Jeff, I'm such a nerd. So Think Week is my baby. Like nobody cares about Think Week like I do. They enjoy it, but everyone's like a little scared of it because I nerd out. So my agenda is it goes day by day, hour by hour. So throughout the year, I've got a list as it hits my brain. This is something we need to talk about in Think Week. This is something that's not working in the business. This is something that we're not going to get to. This is something that we need to revisit. I keep a list throughout the year. And in October, I go back to that list. I'm like, yep, we still got to do that. We got to do that one. And I put it together in agenda and I look at each day and I try to group each day by a subject matter. So we got sales, we got ops, we have account management, we have accounting, we have some whatever things we need to talk about. And I give each of those subjects a time before I actually put together the agenda in terms of time. I say, this is going to take 2 hours. This is going to take 4 hours. This is going to take 30 minutes. And then at the very end, right before we go on Think Week, when by the way, I've pitched this to all the people that are going. I'm like, what else needs to go on here? It gets adjusted, and right at the end, I put times. I put the time that we wake up, the time that we have breakfast, and then if we need 2 hours, I've got it from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then we're moving on. And if
Hard
we're
stop.
not done by 9,
Mm.
we're taking notes and tabling it, and then you're usually at the end. You get tired by the end. So at the last day is like overflow time of things that we need to discuss.
Yeah.
So I say really regimented on that agenda. Clearly, I'm a nerd and geeking out about this. You can hear it all over my voice, I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing I'm hearing, and what I've often found to be lacking in a leadership team, for instance, is really good facilitation, keeping people on track. We all have the things that we want to accomplish. Our brains all work differently. We lead different departments. But when we have good facilitation and a clear plan about how we're going to come together as a variety of stakeholders to come up with ideas, to think together, everybody has equal participation and opportunity to contribute in that time, all because of good facilitation. I
Mhm.
think that makes a really big difference in terms of how well meetings and retreats like that are run. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And if I were to give the people listening a little bit more context as to what this agenda looks like, it's a giant table. So we have the first line is priority is an A, B, or C priority. So if it's an A, we have to talk about it. If it's B, we'd like to talk about it. And if it's C, if we don't have time, the way that things are shaking out, we can kill it. And then we have the actual topic. I have a column that says what's the objective for this time? Do we want to come out of this with SOPs? Do we want to come out with it with a vision statement? Do we want to solve the profitability issue? Like, what are we solving? Who's leading the discussion? And how much time do we have allotted?
Mm.
Literally in the time on the clock.
But not
Um,
you leading everyone, right?
I'm not
You're
leading everyone.
adopting leaders, you're giving people a platform to lead, and but you're facilitating that.
Correct. And everyone gets an agenda like days before we actually go. So if it's your section, you come prepared to lead the group. Have your handouts, have your way that you want to do it. Like be ready with thoughts, because
Hmm.
when it's your time, it's your time.
I feel like that inclusion of all your stakeholders, the empowerment you're giving them by giving them a framework, and the time bound aspect of that is a formula for success. And perhaps that's a new service offering for you. You could speak specifically and teach other people how to run a great retreat like that, a great think session or think week, as you
Yeah.
talk about.
I had a client come to me, and I was telling her about this because I love it. And she goes, "Can you do this for me and my company?" I'm like, "I would be honored. Like, you don't even have to
Yeah.
pay me. I just would love to do it, because it's effective. It's so effective."
Yeah. Don't do that. Get paid. Uh,
Yeah,
that's
dude.
good stewardship. You got to make money.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
true.
A lot of the challenges that I find that come in business aren't just necessarily in those first years. It's once you've maybe established a little bit of success and you're kind of midway through the business, and then the oh crap moment happens. For you, I think you talked a little bit about 2019 as a year of challenge. Can you share a little bit more about what happened then and why it was a particularly formative year for you as a leader?
Yes, we don't like to talk about 2019. So you're getting a lot of vulnerable information. So 2019 was year 2.5 for us, and up till this point, we hired what we thought were really good people, and we thought they knew what they were doing, and we let them do it. At this point, both Chrissy and I and our other leader, Maureen, came from corporate, came from a place where when you gave out a task, it would pretty much be done to the same or similar standard. Um, and then all the clients started blowing up at the same time, literally all at the same time. And they were big problems, like where there was one part of 2019 that like somebody was talking a lawsuit. And what was really scary about that year is that we were like, how do we have all this many problems? All of our people are really good, but what we didn't learn is everyone wasn't doing it the same way. So we had one person doing, I'm going to use accounting for an example. We had one person doing accounting over here. Technically, it's correct, but it's different than the way this person is doing accounting. And that's also technically correct, but it's completely a different way. We did not have a standard way of doing things and a standard process that we trained on, and we learned that lesson the hard way when we were looking across all of these clients that weren't going well and they were having problems, and we had to unravel all of our work to redo it the what we then defined as the correct way, the only way that we now do it. And it's a meticulous way. A lot of accountants don't like to do it this way. Well, the good ones do, because it's the longest way, but it's right. So we had to define that, train on that, and then we had to learn how to like find people's mistakes. So we would trust them, but we would have to verify that things were going according to our plan. People weren't always doing that, and we had to let people go, and we had to rehire, and it was just happening left and right in 2019. So we learned a lot of valuable lessons about um, who our ideal profile is for hiring. The biggest lesson being standardize your processes and procedures down to the nth degree. Trust but verify. You can have really good people that mean well,
Mhm.
but they don't even know that they're making a mistake until your client tells you.
That's right.
And then the other valuable lesson that I learned is listen to your clients, which sounds like such a like no-brainer concept, but we were too busy. This is a leadership competency we didn't know was one. We were too busy defending our people because our people were good people and they were not ill intentioned, that we were not listening to what our clients were saying, truly what they were saying. And then it turns out our clients were right and our people were wrong. And we were too busy trying to come to bat for our team members. And we should have listened to our clients earlier. So we also learned that painful lesson too.
Well, I know these lessons learned and all the ways that you've changed and the systems that you've implemented as a result are going to be super helpful to our listeners. And I've got a couple rapid fire questions because I know we're coming up on time here. But what really has stood out to me about you is that you've mentioned that you refuse to let fear drive your decisions, and this is how you've kind of relied on the power of process and standardization. What advice would you give to leaders who are stuck in fear-based decision making, and why has this become such a defining leadership value for you?
Fear does not serve you. Fear is extremely limiting, and fear doesn't always manifest as I'm scared of something. It could manifest as I'm just really worried about this situation. I have doubt that what I'm going to do works. I'm going to procrastinate because there's an underlying issue that you're not going to do it right, or you don't know the answer and you're uncomfortable that you don't know the answer. None of those things serve you. Good leaders can lead themselves out of really negative places, or at least try, right? You have to get above it and see, like, why did you start this in the first place? Why did you join this organization as a leader in the first place? What is the greater mission for you, not just the company, but for you? Why are you sitting in this seat? And let that drive you. Give yourself the empowerment to go farther than what you believe you can do, because even if you that really corny statement of shoot for the moon, and if you miss you land amongst the stars, it's so true. Have a big, audacious, scary goal, because even if you don't make it, you've still improved yourself and you've still gone farther than maybe sitting in that fear state. It will never ever serve you in any part of your career or your life or your family or anything.
Wow. What's a final rapid fire question that you think, if you were an audience member sitting in on this conversation right now, and you're like, ask this question that we didn't touch on today, that you'd want to share?
Okay, so you asked me in the very beginning what I think is countercultural. What leadership statement is counterintuitive, and not everyone's going to agree with me on this, but I have seen God work too many times in my business to not have a strong faith. And when I started to really look at the leaders that I really admire, they have a very strong foundation in their spiritual life. Whatever they believe, they are super tapped in and super connected to the spiritual walk that they have. And I believe that good leaders, smart leaders, open up their hearts to that, and they let their business walk become their spiritual walk. And when you do that, it doors that you never even thought were there will open. Talking about fear will no longer be there. Trust in your higher power will guide your actions, and everything will work itself out. It is having a strong spiritual base is the best leadership competency you can have, period, bar none. That is my countercultural thought.
Well, in my third year of entrepreneurship, I couldn't agree with you more. I always say I'd be a big pile of goo if it weren't for my faith, and if it weren't
Yeah,
for how important it is when the going gets tough, and it does, as an
it does.
entrepreneur and as a steward of your business. So, Gabrielle, this has been a real gift. Thank you for coming on the Steward Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Steward Chair. If today's conversation inspired you, we'd be grateful if you'd follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Chat with Leaders Media and End of the Line Productions, a collaboration committed to helping leaders steward their influence with purpose and impact. Our production team is Quentin Thomas, executive producer, Thomas Mastrototoro, associate producer, Daniel Mastrototoro, managing editor, and me, Jeff Bond, your creative director, host, and research lead. Until next time, go be a leader worth following.